your rare and out of print book collection is mostly in English.
Yes.
Right?
Or,
Do you? Yeah. Or,
yeah. Or yeah. I mean, I've been asked the question about, like, do you have books in African languages quite a lot? And unfortunately, I don't. It's not something that I've consciously sought, not to get. If I could, I would. But actually trying to get books in local languages, even contemporary books, is very difficult because the official language of Ghana is English. English is what children are taught in schools. I've been to events and meetings with people who write in local languages, and they talk about the difficulty that they have in getting published because obviously publishers say there's not a market for those books in local languages. So it's not something that I have, but it's definitely something that I would look to build up. And I can plug an event that happens in Ghana every December, which is called the Write Ghana Festival, which is run by a woman, a young lady called Nikita Dede. And she started it to promote literature in indigenous Ghanaian languages. And so the first event was last year. They ran a competition to get short stories from, all of the different languages, Twi, Ga, Ewe, Fanti, I can't even think of the others, Ga Dangme, Dagomba, all different Ghanaian languages. They selected winners in each language category, and then they had a festival in December where the winners read out their stories and they were presented with different prizes, and they had all different talks and discussions about writing in local languages. So there are efforts afoot to try to rectify that situation. But for me personally, yes, it's something that I would look to develop in my collection.
Is that something you feel people should be getting behind more, publishing books that are written in indigenous languages? And what kind of social impact do you think it may have on readership, on the readership in Ghana or just in any African country? And the kind of role reading and literature can play or in society or be seen as in society?
I definitely think it has a role to play with getting people more interested in reading and literature. And again, I will plug another initiative here, which is called Echo Books. And they are an audiobook company, a Ghanaian audiobook company. And they do audiobooks in, or they're starting to do audiobooks in the local languages as well, which I think will make a huge difference because already, as I've said, we have an issue with a reading culture in Ghana. And maybe one way to get around that is to have more audiobooks and to have more oral literature. That may be a way to get people into the reading, hopefully. I know people like to talk about Africa as an oral culture, which sometimes is to the detriment of our written work, which, as I've said, we do have a long history of writing and of print. But maybe we shouldn't throw away as well that oral element to our storytelling as a way to get more people involved in literacy and reading.
What do you think the statement by publishers saying that there's no market for it says about the ways in which publishers in general look at African languages and their importance? Because they say there's no market, but how can there be no market on the biggest and most populated continent, or like the second most populated continent in the world? How can that be?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen myself where, especially, we are in an era where we have a growing middle class. And unfortunately, one of those things that is associated with being middle class is ditching everything that you know of your own culture. And so you have lots of people, and this is my bugbear, so I'm not going to go into it too much, middle class people who they don't really want anything. Well, let me stop there. Okay, you try to give them books by African writers, especially for their children, and they're just not interested. They want the books that they grew up reading for their children. So we're talking about like Enid Blyton and all those kind of books. And so you try to give those people, and they're the ones who have the purchasing power, books that are written in the local language. They're just not going to buy it. So then who is your market? And I do think it is a problem of globalization. It's a problem of like the middle class. And they're probably deep-rooted problems.
Do you think the legacies of the past have something to do with that?
For sure they have something to do with it, but also what's happening now as well. Because I think we are increasingly aware that if we want to compete in the 21st century, if Africa is to develop, people believe that the only way to do that is by giving your children a more and more Western education. And I guess, what can you say? I mean, you can do the two. You know, you can have a Western education, which is what we allegedly get in the schools, and then you can, you know, teach your children at home things that schools are not designed. And these are not just schools in Ghana. You know, it's as Audre Lorde said, and many other people. You can't expect. I don't want to use the word the oppressor, but let's say the master. You can't expect the master to teach your children things that you want them and need them to know. It's just not going to happen. So that's something that we have to do for ourselves.
Do you speak any African languages?
I don't, but I understand. I understand Tree, but I don't speak it. I speak it, but I don't speak it well enough that most people would be able to understand me, apart from my mum and a few other people.
So you understand Tree enough to follow every conversation?
Yes, definitely. Yes. I mean, there are some times when people will speak to me and say things that I won't understand, but I'd say 80% of things I can understand.
That's nice. So will you discriminate in quote unquote, right, based on the language, on the African language, for the books that you try to buy or add to your collection? Is there a language you are particularly fond of, even though you don't understand it? Or...
No, definitely not. I would try to, I mean, I guess I would have to start somewhere. I would have to start somewhere. And I guess the easiest books to find, maybe it's Swahili, actually.
Right.
I don't know. But yeah, that's actually something that I'm going to think about a lot. And when I set my mind to something, I tend to do it. So expect a whole load of books in various African languages, which I don't know which ones they will be. But yeah, for sure.
Well, like Ngugi wa Thiong'o said, there's always translation.
Yes.
If it's in a language you don't understand, you get it translated and that's it.
Exactly, yes.
Because I read lots of books that were originally in German or French. I do understand both languages, but I like reading them in English.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's not rocket science.
No.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to let?
Actually, that's a good point. Actually, when you said about French, because obviously Lusophone writers are a huge group of people in Africa that I know are underrepresented in my library. I'm not sure if that's because they're not translated as much. So I will definitely be looking to get in English more books that were written originally in Portuguese. And I should say two of the best books that I've read in the last 3 months were originally written in Spanish and I think in Portuguese, which are La Bastarda by Trifonia Obonio Melibia.
I've heard
and the other one that I can't remember, but I've got a terrible memory.
Okay, and how about French books in your library, in the French language? Because Ghana is flanked by French-speaking countries, right?
Yes.
So how about those?
Do you know, I have a lot of French books in translation. I have a lot of French writers in translation.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to think. There's Marie Ndiaye. Loads of them. Like even from the old Kamara Lai, I have his whole collection. That was obviously originally in French from Guinea. Loads of French from Martinique as well, from the Caribbean islands. Patrick Chamoiseau, Leopold Senghor. I have loads of French. Yes, loads of French writers in the English translation, not in the French.
Right.
Apart from my old school books, Literandra by Albert Camus. Yes.
Oh my God, I hated it. I did it in school, so I hated it. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say about your library, about your work, anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like people should know and that you want to put out there?
Yeah, I would say if you get a chance to come to Ghana, please do. Please stop by our library, because I think it is an experience in itself. I don't think that you would come there and leave not having learned anything or discovered anything, or just had a good time, just knowing that you're in a house of literature, you're in a house of African and Black literature, and that you belong to a global diaspora and African community. So that is definitely the kind of purpose of the library. It's to show the breadth and the scale of our work as writers and our contribution to literary history. And I don't think you would be disappointed if you came.
I'm sure nobody will. How can people support you, either directly in Ghana or from a distance, from the West, wherever they are in the world? Yeah,
we have a Patreon page. So if you would like to make a small regular contribution, you can do that through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com /LibrariaGH. If you want to donate books, you can do that also. If you're in the UK, we have a UK address that you can send the books to, and they will be shipped to Ghana from here. So you don't have to pay the cost of postage to Ghana.
So no excuse, basically.
Yes, definitely.
Sylvia, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you,
we at Literandra, we love you.
And I love you too.
And we are very, very proud of you. And yeah, all the best. And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.